Hello, it's Craig Thompson, and this is the Stratford Slice.
I said, I'm only playing small theaters. They have to have real pianos. Because even if I have a set, usually after the first few nights I realize, well, this ain't working or that ain't working, and I'll have to substitute it with something else, or shorten it, or lengthen it even.
We don't want perfection. We just want realism.
You want realism.
When Ron Sexsmith announced a few years ago that he and his wife, Colleen Hicksonbaugh, were making their grand escape from Toronto and moving to Stratford, the cool factor of our little city moved up a notch. We were really a somewhere town. So when I started this podcast, I knew I had to do whatever it takes to get Ron Sexsmith on the show, but I had a bit of a problem because I felt a little bit intimidated about approaching Ron. He always seemed so busy creating that I didn't want to bother him with yet another request. But I also chickened out a bit because I didn't ask you directly. I asked Kismet, who works for me, who asked Colleen, and she said yes, you said yes, and here you are today. So thanks for saying yes.
My pleasure. Yeah, I like the medieval music that's off the top. That's
Paul Shilton wrote that.
Paul. We love Paul.
Yeah, Paul Shilton wrote that. Do you find that people are hesitant to approach you because you always seem to be that you're either busy creating or making music? Is that just me, or is that something that you find in common?
I don't know. I mean, it's. I know when I first moved here, I found. I mean, it seemed like people knew I was here already. You know, they would say hi from their cars as they drove by. I know, Anne over at Revel was saying when I first started going there, she was kind of a little intimidated, which is pretty weird, because I don't feel that way. I feel quite approachable. But it's true that when I'm walking around, oftentimes I'm singing in my head and I'm writing, but I don't mind. I don't know. I'm never bothered by anyone.
I've seen you at a lot of concerts and a few social events here in Stratford, and I do see you walking around a bit. You walk around because you don't drive, right?
That's right. That's part of the reason we came here, because I needed to get out of Toronto, but I also had to live. I couldn't live in the country, per se. I need to be able to walk to the cafe or walk to the YMCA, and all, which I'm doing after this, actually. So, yeah, and I'm very, I don't know if it's a compulsive thing, but I'm very routine. I have to do my walk every day, and I walk the same way along the river to town, and I did that in Toronto. I had my daily constitutional, and I walk, get my coffee, and walk through Trinity Bellwoods, and I need that sort of to feel calm, and that's how I write, by walking around. So, and this is a perfect city for that kind of experience,
Now, you grew up in St. Catharines, so why didn't you move to the Niagara Peninsula? Why did you choose Stratford?
I guess there was actually a minute where we considered it, moving back home, because my parents are getting older, and also we thought even the Hamilton area. But part of me didn't really want to go back to St. Catharines as well, because I spent the first 18 years of my life there, and I feel I'd be going backwards to do that. And I didn't really, other than my younger brother and my parents, I don't really have any reason to be there. It was a great city to grow up. Actually, today they had a little bit of a tremor. I don't know if you heard. Pretty scary. But so for me, coming to Stratford, I really felt like we had a fresh start. I never owned a house before. I didn't know anyone at first, and that was kind of cool. We made a lot of really good friends here. And it was just that, like, how often in your 50s do you get a chance at a brand new start? So
so you're very welcomed, and you've got involved in things at the museum or Revival House, various places like that.
Yeah, I mean, we love the theater, and we love I was doing a residency during the pandemic, which was sort of a win-win. I think for me, I needed to feel useful, and and also it gave people a relatively normal night out to see a show and have dinner. And so, we feel quite settled here now. We have like a great social scene, great group of friends, and great.
And how do you describe Stratford to your friends? Because we're a little bit of an island of this. It's almost like an island of a neighborhood in Toronto, plunked in the middle of a cornfield.
Well, it's so unlike almost every other city in Ontario. I mean, there are some, obviously Paris is beautiful. There's so many nice qualities, right? Even, in St. Catharines as well. But Stratford's got other stuff going on, like the theater and the chef colony and all these great restaurants that I'm. I just feel there's a cultural vibe here that doesn't. I never felt that in St. Catharines, for example. I don't know, and not that obviously it's my hometown, but if it was much more of a paper mill kind of town. And I mean, now they have an arts center on the main street, and I think once you start doing that, things happen a bit. But I don't know. A lot of my friends were afraid I was going to be really bored here, but I was like, why? What are you doing in Toronto that's so exciting? Most people are just staying home or doing their routine. So. I don't know. It really appealed to me. I mean, Colleen worked here before we moved, and so I would come up occasionally and get the lay of the land, and I would try to imagine myself, I think I could live here, and it took some persuading, but...
You were hesitant a little bit.
I was dragging my feet. She had sort of given up on the idea, but then we were in a very perilous position in Toronto because we didn't own a house. Our landlord was getting very old. And we were afraid if he died, well, he has passed away now, but we didn't know what would happen to us if we'd have to, because we had a whole house that we were renting for the most unbelievable rent in Trinity Bellwoods. We never would have got anything close to that. So we got out just in time, and we were able to find, for me, my, dream house, my Graceland or whatever. And so it's. And it was all Colleen. She was the brains of the operation. So.
And you were lucky enough to get here before the pandemic and before the boom. You've been here now 6 or 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, the housing prices now. I mean, we got ours kind of for a steal in a way. And we've made it our own. I mean, Colleen came here. Colleen lived here 2 months before I even moved in, fixing the place up because she's the handy one, And, so... I don't know. I love this town, and in the winter. It's very pretty. It's like a Christmas card. Like the snow stays, and then every season is quite. Like we live in a house that's surrounded by trees, so we get all the leaves in the autumn, and the summer looks very, it's all green and birds everywhere, and we have rabbits, and we even have an owl on our property. So I'm seeing nature in a way that I never did see it in Toronto that much. So.
And the great thing about Stratford is you and I are neighbors almost. We're just a few blocks.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A few blocks apart. My daughter goes to school right across the street in that subdivision there where Bedford School is, just across the way.
I cut through there every day, actually.
Yeah.
Huh.
Part of the reason why I'm honored that you made time in your schedule to come here today, because as we're recording this, we're only a week or so out from the release of your new album in a while, Vivian Line, which also has a Stratford connection I want you to talk about.
Yeah.
But also, I believe later this week, you're heading off on a tour, so you found the time. So thanks very much for stopping by.
Yeah, it was kind of crunch time this week. Today I had an interview with a guy from Liverpool who sounded just like one of the Beatles, actually. And it's just, and I'm very happy that we could sort of squeeze this in. This is sort of our last week of relative freedom before we're in a car driving every day.
I would have had to wait a few months.
Or we could have done it over the phone. I don't know, but
it's much better in person.
I think so. And
so tell me about the Stratford inspiration and the Stratford connection to the album, even the name.
Yeah, well, when we first, I think the first time we'd rented the big moving van and we were coming here. We had, it took us about 3 trips to move all our stuff from Toronto into this house. And I kept noticing this street called the Vivian Line, this rural route. And I was like, Vivian Line, that's interesting. And I remember looking even online and couldn't find any information. I talked to people. And this was, again, 2017, so I didn't know I was going to make this record or anything. And so when it came time to, when I was putting these songs together, I just, it just sort of occurred to me, it's like this album and Hermitage, my previous record, are very Stratford-centric. It's all about my new life, and the Vivian Line, for me, kind of represented a sort of portal, from my old life in Toronto to my new one. Because whenever we came here, we always ended up on the Vivian Line. And when we hit the road, we got on the Vivian Line and it dumps us out on the main road or whatever. So it just sort of became this sort of metaphor. But then it's funny because a friend of ours who lives in town just randomly sent us all this information. I don't know where I think she went to the library maybe. But Vivian was the daughter of a kind of a landowner here at one point from, I guess, the 1800s or whatever. And she was apparently the first woman school bus driver in this neck of the woods. And she just passed away actually this past November. I wish I would have known before, but so it seems even more fitting now as a tribute. I wish someone would have told her beforehand, but so it just became. I always like to pick a song or an album title that's not named after one of the songs on the record, because otherwise people think, oh, that's the important song or whatever. So I try to think of something that's a bit more mysterious, and the Vivian Line just, I don't know, it just sort of always intrigued me.
Now, all of your past work, Ron, has been noted for its soulfulness, its spirituality, its deep thinking. But looking at what I've seen of this album so far, have you entered a more optimistic phase? Because there's a bit of gratefulness, like Diamond Wave, When Our Love Was New. Do you think coming to Stratford has pushed you onto kind of a plateau where you're more thankful in your life than you might have been before?
I think so. I mean, even like again with my previous album, Hermitage, that was a very kind of romantic album, very upbeat lyrically. Because I was kind of amazed to find myself in such a happy new phase. And this record is kind of an extension of that, although it's not as, the last album I had a goofy album cover where I have a feather boa and all that stuff. This record feels a little more wistful, a little more introspective.
Reflective of where you've been, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe even, I'm just trying to, looking back on my childhood, like in Powder Blue. But definitely romantic songs like When Our Love Was New. But even that is kind of wistful because I'm looking at almost in the rearview mirror in a way. Wow, look how we sort of fit a lot of living into this. Like we've been together over 20 years, and you think about all the tours we've done and just all that. And so that's a big component. And even the song What I Had in Mind, which was the first single, is kind of about my childhood and how I kind of struggled in school and my prospects weren't super great, but that it ultimately worked out. So by the last verse, you get a sense. Actually, it has the line, the Vivian Line in that song, as we're heading out on the road again. So so it's very much about where I'm at now and looking back a bit. So.
And it's interesting, most artists, when they do a music video, they put themselves on camera.
Yeah.
But you've explored another medium for this particular album. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, when I was on the major labels in the 90s, you were under contract. You had to do 2 videos per albums, and I hated doing them. Even when I was younger and thinner and all this stuff, I still didn't like... I just felt I couldn't rise to the occasion. Like I really got to hand it to people who are great in videos who really come to life. I would get really, I would feel really awkward. But then there came a point where the labels wouldn't pay for videos anymore, and I was kind of relieved. But then they became the era of this, what they call the lyric video. So every time you had a single, some guy at the label in the art department would do this video, just of random footage of things with the lyrics. And I thought, okay, that's cool. I don't need to be in it. But now we stumbled upon this fellow named C.J. Wallace he approached us and said, hey, I'm a fan. I'm a filmmaker. I'd love to, work with you. And we said, well, there's no budget for you to, and he didn't even seem to mind. So for this album, for the first time ever, he's doing 4 videos. And when they're all done, it's gonna make up one short film that he's gonna apparently enter in some film festivals. And so we're really, they're all animated and they're kind of, a bit quirky. And the last one was actually quite touching. So I'm really curious to know what the 4th and final video is going to be, because I don't have any input in it at all. I just wait for him to send it to me.
He uses your music and you put something together.
Yeah. But we're really grateful for him. We're hoping at the end of the day we'll be able to give him some kind of money for his efforts, because it's It's a lot of work.
Yeah, they're very interesting. Well, let's go back. You were talking about how this album is inspired by your reflective mood of your childhood in St. Catharines. Let's go back
Yeah.
to your childhood, because it was a while before you ended up going to Toronto. And tell us about when you first picked up that guitar. And I believe you played at a tavern in
Yeah.
Port Colborne or Port Dalhousie?
Port Dalhousie.
Port Dalhousie, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always loved to sing, from a very early age. And, and I, like a lot of kids, I thought, oh, it would be great to do this for a living. But it didn't seem like possible coming, I don't know, from St. Catharines, so when it got up into high school, I was really, I tried all the shop programs. I wasn't good at that. Around that time, I had some buddies who, one week we'd want to be detectives, the next week we'd want to be in a rock band, every week. And so we started messing around. We had these really cheap instruments, and I got sort of stuck on guitar. I was never interested in the guitar. My favorite instrument is the piano, but I got sort of guilted into it. And so by the time I got out of high school, I graduated in 81, I was sort of good enough where I knew the basic chords, but I didn't know what I was going to do after school. I didn't have any plans to go to college or anything. So my older brother, Don, recommended he was playing in a band himself at this place called the Lions Tavern. He got me an audition there, and he said, if you're going to play here, you got to learn Beatles, Neil Diamond, and all that stuff. So I did. I would take albums up from the library and learn sort of all the hits. And, I mean, I wasn't even old enough to be in a bar, so I had to get permission from the government, a little letter. And when I wasn't on stage, I had to go sit in a room by myself and wait. And I did 4 sets, so they would come knock on the door. Okay, Ron, we're ready for you. I mean, obviously, they sort of loosened up after a while, but they became very protective of me, the patrons, because I was like this little kid, and they'd sneak me drinks when I was underage. If the cops came, they would sort of hide me and all that kind of stuff. So that was a great learning experience for me.
And that's in St. Catharines. You started your family and then moved to Toronto. Is that the order of things?
Well, what happened was, from that experience, I started to, try to think, well, how do I make a career out of this other than playing bars? And I wanted to make a demo, so I went tree planting because I heard you could make a lot of money. It was very hard work, tree planting. I hated it.
Out in BC or Northern Ontario?
Northern Ontario. Yeah. And but while I was there, I ended up meeting a girl and getting her pregnant. So which sort of was a curveball to my life, because all of a sudden I thought, well, how am I supposed to have a music career now? But having my son was what made me a songwriter, because I started writing my first songs literally weeks after he was born, because I had all the upheaval. I wrote a song called Speak with the Angel. This was like 1985. Didn't even think very much of the song, but that song ultimately would get my publishing deal, then my record deal years later. So that all was coming together. And when it was in Quebec, we were living in a barn, literally, outside of Three Rivers, where I started telling my former partner, I think I'm a songwriter. I think we got to go to Toronto and try to make this work, because I didn't know what else I was supposed to do. So, and that was, like I say, 85, and we didn't actually make it to Toronto until 87, because we had to went back to St. Catharines and worked for a bit, tried to raise money. I think back on it now, it was just ridiculous, like insane, going to Toronto. I worked as a courier, and then every night I had to go out and try to make connections and play the open stages, and then get up and work the next day. So it was a lot of hard work, but I was stubborn. I had a vision, and I had a dream, so.
As you were a courier, I presume you were an on-foot courier?
Foot courier.
So were you writing stuff as you wandered around, observing life and things like that? Did you give you that chance?
Pretty much every song on my first album was written on the job, like Secret Heart. I would get a song, and I had my little scribble books, and I would have to sing it to myself all day, and hum it, and hope I wouldn't forget the melody by the time I got home. I didn't have like a dictaphone or anything. So, but yeah, and then even when I got home, because I had 2 small children by this point, and we lived in a 1-bedroom house, that there was really no room for me to do my thing, so I'd have to wait till everyone was in bed, And then I would go down in the basement or I'd go on the front porch and try to write songs. And but I did though, and so yeah, I mean, it was just, and like I say, I was going out every night to the open stages as well, and hearing some of the most amazing songwriters, a lot of them who never really made it either, but who had a huge influence on me, like Bob Snyder and a guy named Sam Larkin who passed away recently. But anyway, it was glad I did it.
Well, let's play something from Vivian Line, maybe Diamond Wave. Want to set that up?
Yeah, actually, it's a good setup because that's a very, very old song. I wrote that song in 1988 in Toronto, and I just completely forgot about it. But what happened was, I was a courier, and in December of '87, I'd only been working there a month or so. I lost a package, and I was almost fired. And I was so freaked out. Had a young family. And on my birthday, which is January 8th, they called me after the Christmas holidays to come in for a meeting, and they were going to decide whether to fire me or not. And they didn't know it was my birthday. And so thankfully they gave me another chance. So I was walking home feeling greatly lifted, hadn't lost my job, and I wrote the entire song, on the bus and then on the subway. It took me all these different means to get home. And by the time and it was really exciting because I hadn't really written a song since I moved to Toronto. And that was the one that kind of broke the ice. And so, so years and years later, I was reminded of it and just started playing it again. I think I tweaked some of the lyrics, to make them more now.
Well, here we are 35 years later. Let's listen to Diamond Wave.
Okay.
That's Diamond Wave by Ron Sexsmith off his new album, Vivian Line. Ron, my background is as a writer, but I went to journalism school. I write news and documentaries and films and things like that. And I've tried writing lyrics, but I'm a miserable failure. So when I meet someone like you and hear your lyrics, it's like magic.
Wow.
How do you you talked earlier about jotting down notes, but where do the ideas come from and how do you actually remember it all?
Well, lyrics for me are the hard part too. I mean, melody is super easy. I just have melodies coming to me all the time, and which is kind of mysterious. I don't know where they come from, but it's like the lyrics, it's hard to explain, but sometimes I'll get a phrase in my head. I had a song called Love Shines at one point, and this line came to me one day. I was on a ferry in Europe, and the line was, in every nowhere town there are somewhere dreams, And I thought, oh, that has potential or something. I just scribbled that one line in a book and just stared at it for months. Couldn't think where to go from there. But that's part of the songwriting thing. You get this little nugget of a melody or a phrase, or maybe it's something you're going through or you're feeling, and you scribble down. I like when I'm writing lyrics, it's important to almost like scribble down as much as you can, unedited, because oftentimes you can take that and work with it, But it takes a lot of patience and returning to it again and again. And then all of a sudden, it's like a puzzle, and then you realize, oh, I see. And I'm a stickler for, internal rhyming schemes, and like if the first verse really sings well, I want the second verse to sing as well. I don't want it to be this awkward, square peg kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I work on that. I try to use sort of a similar kinds of phrases in the second verse, and I've noticed people like Gordon Lightfoot does that as well. They'll be like the second verse. There's words that are almost like, it's hard to explain, but they're sort of in the same ballpark as the lyrics he used in the first verse. And so it's just this thing where I pull my hair out over it. And, but ultimately, I don't really do anything else. So there's just one thing that I focus all my energy on. And I know I can do it if I'm patient, because, a lot of people, they get lazy and they co-write and whatever. But it is tricky writing lyrics because I want the lyrics to be as good as the melody, and I want to make sure that I've said everything I want to say in the most sort of economical way. So.
Well, I follow you on Twitter, and let me read you something.
Well, that's all wordplay too, Twitter, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to read something off Twitter. This is how you describe, this is your Twitter handle. Half man, half melody, idiot savant without the savant part,
Yeah.
and former kid detective.
Yeah, that's all true.
Analyze that for me. Tell me what that all means.
Well, I do feel, with me, I'm kind of on the spectrum a bit. And I've always, I could get up tonight and sing a whole night of Bob Dylan songs and not rehearse. Like, I remember it's my superpower. So, but also in that sense, I was sort of making fun of myself without the savant part, But I do have that sort of element with, I'm sort of, where you're uber focused on one thing and you're not good at anything else. So there's that. I don't know if that's Asperger's or whatever it is,
right.
But and they couldn't figure out when I was a kid what to do with me, which was sort of part of that song, what I had in mind, because I just wasn't there. They actually put me back a grade and then put me into a higher creative writing class to try to figure out what was going on in my head. And the other part about the kid detective was true, because I had a detective agency when I was 10 or 11 with my friend Carl. And we actually even got hired for a case. We got hired to solve it was a missing watch case. And we never found it. But
did you write a song about it?
No, but I wrote, I don't know. I was really big into Hardy Boys and Sherlock Holmes.
Me too. I love that. Yeah. And
I've always, I like true crime, all that stuff. But I never wrote a song about it. But I just love, I remember I had a sign up front of my house. We were called SPY. And my older stepbrother, was just so embarrassed that he would tear the sign down when he got home, and I have to make a new one and put it up again.
My dumb brother doing this spy business.
Yeah, he was older and had no imagination, I guess.
Well, getting back to Twitter, I'm wondering if you use Twitter for practicing lyrics, because this is something I pulled off yesterday. Yep. Chinese spy balloon, Putin acting like a bad cartoon, or some brutal thug or evil goon as the Taliban inflict their Stone Age rules and the GOP act like scumbag tools.
Did I write that? Because I wrote another one that was sort of, let me see. Yeah, I wrote that. Yeah, but I was trying to write it to the tune of 99, like sort of
Red balloons.
Balloons, yeah. Yeah, well, then they found out that it was like a weather balloon, right?
Well, there's an argument. The Chinese say it's a weather balloon. Yeah. The Americans shot it down to see if that was right. So you obviously are a keen observer. The world is in a little bit of a strange place right now.
Yeah.
Tell me your perspective on what's going on in the world, how it impacts you, and then how you respond through music.
Well, the thing about like in terms of Twitter, I've always liked wordplay, and Twitter gives me an opportunity to write in all different disciplines in a way. I write sketches, I write little Twitter poems, I call them. I do a lot of stupid puns, and because I like Jack Benny and Groucho Marx and those people. But also it's a place where I can be political in a way, which I try to avoid as much as possible, because sometimes you'll put out a tweet and people come after you, and then you spend the day blocking people
because you're commenting on something.
And it's such a divisive era now, So I'm very troubled by the world. I have very little faith in America right now that they're ever going to get it together, because Canada is divided in here too, but in America they seem so entrenched, in their positions. And one party just seems to be not even dealing in reality, and so it's just been disheartening. But for me, I don't really have any power except to write sometimes these sort of mocking, tweets about mostly, like GOP or something, or Trump. I'm still upset about that. I can't believe they'd let a person like that, give them that type of power. So Twitter is a little outlet for me, but for the most part, I try to make it a fun place and a kind place. And I have I upload videos from my YouTube channel, mostly covers where I'm in my kitchen singing songs. And I announce birthdays. Like today it was the late Gord Downey's birthday. It was the late Kate McGarrigle's birthday. So it's become this almost like my own little variety show. And also I write blurbs about my records and memories and all that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but the world scares me and touring scares me now. So I try to make Twitter a place where people can feel, could calm down a bit.
But your lyrics, the lyrics of your songs and your melodies act in a way a little bit therapeutic for the people who love your music, because you're relating experiences that we all face. In fact, you've been called the songwriter's songwriter. Some of the best songwriters in the industry, Paul McCartney, Elvis Costello, lots of people think that you are the creme de la creme of. Well, you seem to capture the essence of what it's like to be human, more than other people can do in their songs.
That's, for me as a fan of songwriters, they all did that for me, So I think oftentimes if I'm writing a song that's comforting or whatever, I'm writing it kind of for myself first, for my own head, So, but all those songwriters I admired, they changed my life with their lyrics and their perspectives about things. And I was a good student, I just was I really paid attention. And I think the reason some of these old guys, I don't want to call them old guys, but the old guard or whatever, sort of lifted me up a little bit is because I think they could see that I really respected what they did and I was trying to follow in their footsteps. But I love it when someone writes me and says, oh, this song, whatever, really spoke to me or means a lot to me. We even got a message from some people in Ukraine the other day who were separated because of the war. And they'd asked if we could send the chords to one of my songs so they could play it. And that was like, that just knocks all the wind out of you, So it's a powerful thing, and so you don't want to, you want to use your power for good, right? You want the songs to say something. Not every song has to say some important thing. Diamond Wave is just a fun song, whatever. But some songs, for whatever reason, they become more potent, and you don't know why necessarily.
Do you think we're at a time in the world right now where your songs might resonate more because people are looking for an escape?
I think so. I definitely feel that way. And even on the last tour, just people were so emotional. I think not just because of me, but the pandemic was really hard on everybody. They didn't know, when are we ever going to be together again and see live music. Like my very first show of the tour last year was in Dublin. A sold-out show at this really nice theater. And I got, walking out on stage, it was kind of like I got the hero's welcome. All I did was get on a plane and go to Dublin, But it had been years since I'd been there, and there was just this feeling like, oh, we've missed this so much,
Welcoming an old friend. Right?
Yeah, and I'm sure it was the same for anyone else who went and played.
But Ron, your style is very different. I've seen you perform, and it's almost like you may have 100 people in the audience, but each person feels like they're in the living room with you, listening to you play.
Well, that's good to know, because I'm going to America where I don't always do well. I know that some of the shows are sold out in America, and I don't play big places, but there's a few shows that I don't know if anyone's coming, really, that places I've never played. But I know that whoever is there, they'll be so into it, because I do have this like cult following. And I remember playing Eugene, Oregon a couple years ago, and there was some woman that had been waiting for me to come my whole career. I had no idea. And she was all very emotional after the show, and and it was, that kind of stuff is just really, you put a song out into the world, and then you have no control over who it's going to reach. And
that's right.
So I'm really curious to see how the American tour goes, because I feel there's this kind of excitement that has been building, because I haven't been there since 2015, and the people who were fans before are people who've discovered me over the last few years or whatever. I'm really curious to see what the response will be.
Now, people can see the tour dates on your website, but just remind me, where are you traveling? The Midwest and West, or is it all over the place in the States?
It's all over. We start in Boston, and then we go down the east side of Connecticut and all that, down to Nashville, with North Carolina and Georgia and all that. And then we come back up, and it's, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Chicago, and I think there's Detroit or Ann Arbor. So I'm probably forgetting places. Oh, we're obviously playing New York. And
you mentioned Eugene, Oregon, too.
That's later in the
Okay,
month. We're
right.
going out west, and we start in Denver or something. So we're doing the Washington State and and Oregon, and as well as California, Sacramento. I think we're playing Arizona.
So what places are you hesitant about that you're not so certain?
Well, I've never played like Connecticut before. I've only ever played North Carolina, maybe once or twice opening for someone. So I don't know. I know we'll do, like the Nashville shows are sold out. I think New York will be sold out, and Chicago and those places. But then over Bend, Oregon, I've never been there. Like, I don't know who knows me in Bend, Oregon. Who knows me in, I'm playing Mill Valley. I've never played Mill Valley.
In California.
In California. I mean, I've played San Francisco, which is kind
Well, I think your partners, your promoters, probably have a pretty good read of the markets where they've asked you to play. So.
Yeah, and I never know. I mean, these offers come in,
Yeah.
and you go, but you just want, you're traveling so far that you hope that the promoter's going to be happy, and that you're going to get enough people that you don't feel like a loser, which has happened on the last American tour. I remember I played, it was hard. I played Portland. Portland was the actually last show of that 2015 tour, and there was about 11 people there in this place that holds like 300 people. And I just remember writing my manager, I go, I don't think I should come back to America. It doesn't seem to be happening here. But now I'm feeling more optimistic.
Now, you're a veteran of tours. You've opened for Coldplay, I believe, and Sarah McLachlan. On this tour of America, do you have an opening act, or is that up to the promoter in each area?
Originally, the show was promoted as an evening where I would do 2 sets and an intermission. But some of the shows, because of ticket sales are light, like I think, I can't remember which ones, but so a few of the shows do have an opener. Over in Europe and that, I'm not really having any openers. And I'm fine having an opener. But it's
They're there to see you, though. That's really what people are there to see.
Well, the idea, too, if the promoter's putting an opener on the bill, is that this person hopefully can sell some tickets, too, So, which I don't know if that's the case or not, but... So it's a little funny going into this tour, because depending on where you see me, you're going to see a different show, because some shows I'll be doing 2 sets with intermission. Some shows have pianos, some don't. So some shows will have an opener, in which case I'll play just 1 set. So it's hard to kind of get your groove going when it's changing, when the venues... Right. Like on my last tour, I made it with my management, I said, I'm only playing small theaters. They have to have real pianos, no openers, so that you can get into this sort of thing every night. And
a rhythm. So
a rhythm.
Yeah.
And this tour, especially the American portion of it, that's all out the window. And I just have to wait every night and adjust. Okay, what's happening tonight? And it'll be fine. I've done it before.
In terms of routine, it must also help to have a set list memorized that you're going to do each location, or do you have to change the set list depending on the location?
That's the hard part. The last tour, I pretty much did the same set every night, except with a few alternative songs, because, there's people requesting stuff too,
Yeah.
And this tour, I'm just pulling my hair out over the set list, because it's going to change nightly. And also, you're trying to second guess, based on where you are, like what songs might they know or what do they want to hear. So I'm really having a hard time writing a set list. Every time I think I've got a good set list, I realize, I should probably do this one. And then, I don't know, it's all like first world problems, or, you know what I mean? But it's still, for me, I'm hoping at some point because even if I have a set, usually after the first few nights I realize, well, this ain't working or that ain't working, and I'll have to substitute it with something else, or shorten it, or lengthen it even. So I don't know. It's but every day I set up in my sort of living room with where the piano is. I set up like a concert, and I go and I run through the whole set, and so I feel like whatever happens, I'll be ready for it.
But you don't have to worry about it, because I think one of the things people like about your concerts is you think out loud between songs, and people, you're reading the mood of the night, and you share that with people. I think I'll play this, or it makes it a different concert experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have a framework, and then sometimes you're looking at the set list, and I don't want to do that one, and you put something else. Or sometimes the audience kind of hijacks the set, and they'll start yelling out songs, and like, oh, okay, play that one, and which is fun, and it's also sometimes not ideal because you're trying to rein it in again back to because you don't want to play 3 slow songs in a row or whatever. So there's just a lot of, but I find that with my audience, they're very informal. Yeah. They'll just talk to me like as if I'm in the audience or something. And
you tell the story of it led the motivation. What's the reason for this song? And how that's
I do
very entertaining.
I do a little bit, yeah. And when I'm with my band, I do less of that.
Okay.
Because we're you're trying to have some momentum for the show. But
exactly.
With the solo type of show, you can be a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? You can sort of take your time ad lib and stop. Sometimes if I'm playing this first verse and I forgot a lyric, I'll stop and I'll start over. And people are very forgiving because they're seeing a human being, right?
Exactly.
And every note they hear.
We don't want perfection. We just want realism.
You want realism, and everything. When I do a solo show, I'm first of all, I'm more nervous than I am when I do a band show, and at the end of the show, I'm way more exhausted because it's just everything they're hearing is coming from you.
Yeah.
Every mistake or whatever happens, and when it goes well, it's like the greatest feeling in the world. It's like, well, I did that all by myself. You took the evening from here and you took it there. And then I'll lie in my hotel room all night thinking about all the things I did right or did wrong. Or it's just a whole mental...
Meanwhile, your audience is going home happy that they heard you play.
Well, yeah.
Nobody's judging you.
Surprisingly, yeah. People are always very, oh, that was a great show. Even if you didn't think it was a great show, they'll say nice things. And so you want to be at least consistent, even so that if you're having a bad night, nobody notices, right? Yeah. So... that's part of it.
Well, you'll be playing Vivian Line sets, I'm sure, and we'll play another track off the album right now, When Our Love Was New. Do you want to set that up?
Yeah, this one is like one of my favorites on the record. I was surprised that the label wanted to put it out as a single because it's like a real ballad. But it's just a song about Colleen and I, and at this point in the stage in our life, looking back on how far we've come. And it's very wistful. And a friend of mine the other day told me it sounds like something Sinatra could have sung. I love him. So, but it's a very self-explanatory song. It's very romantic and sweet.
Let's give it a listen. When Our Love Was New from Ron Sexsmith's new album, Vivian Line. Well, that's wonderful, Ron.
Thank you.
And where can people? You're doing this album on vinyl, which also speaks to the type of audience you've got as well, right? Tell us about where people can find obviously you can digital listen to it on Spotify, but you want people to touch and feel something, right?
I'm just happy however people hear it. I mean, I personally like vinyl. I even like CDs. And it's, they're not doing CDs in North America, but the UK label is putting some CDs. So, but I guess people can get it wherever they get other records. They can get it digitally, or they can order it. I think even on our website you'll be able to order it, or from maybe even the label. But I'm sort of the worst person to ask because I go to the record store, and that's where and if they don't have the record, I'll ask the guy if he can order it for me and it'll come in. So however people get their records, they'll be able to get this one. So.
And what do you listen to for pleasure? Who do you listen to?
Well, one of my heroes, and this is more of a recent thing, is Warren Zevon, who died in the early 2000s. And I just started getting into him around the time when I heard he was sick. Because I always knew about him, but I only really knew, Werewolves of London or something, which I liked, but it was kind of a goofy song. But then around that time, I started just zeroing in on him, and to the point where I got kind of obsessed. And I think, especially during the pandemic, his music has really got me through, because there's something very heroic about his songs, and almost he's got this sort of pirate energy. You know, he had a pretty crazy life, and he was really out of control for a long time. And he's such a great command. You talk about lyrics. This guy's lyrics are so great. His point of view, his sense of humor, his command of the English language. So he's someone I listen to, probably drive Colleen up the wall with him, actually. But I listen to him a lot. And I heard he may be getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame finally, way overdue. So, but I love him. I love a lot of the same people I've always loved, like the Kinks. I still listen to, and I love, Lowell George, and I still listen to a lot of Gordon Lightfoot.
You've done a lot of collaborations over the years. Now that we're emerging from the pandemic and people are getting out there, do you have anything in the works that you'd like to try with people you might have worked with before or people you haven't?
The only thing I really want to do is, I wrote a book called Dear Life, and I wrote a musical based on the book, and I would really love someday for that to be either a movie or on stage, because I think the songs are really good. And I was actually in talks with a movie company for a while. I don't know where it stands now, but they really liked it, and we were on the same page in terms of how we saw it. And where it left off is they were trying to see if they find the right screenwriter, and that was back in the summer, and I haven't really heard, so I don't know if they're still into it or not. But that, for me, would be, hopefully before I die, I'd love to see that in production somehow.
We talked earlier about how some of the great musicians admire your work, and I want you to tell me the Paul McCartney story in a second, but I want to share a little story with you, because I had the chance to interview Paul McCartney, and I nearly blew it. So I was the CBC radio correspondent in London way back when, and it was the 20th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's, I think it was.
Okay.
And I was invited, all the foreign press were invited.
That would have been 86, right?
Yeah,
86.
yeah. I was invited to Abbey Road Studios,
Wow.
and I was a Beatles fan from way back, and here I was going to Abbey Road Studios, and here he was with Linda at the time, and I had the chance to ask him a question, and I couldn't get the words out of my mouth. I was so freaking nervous. And he made some sort of joke about the cat's got your tongue. So I kind of blew it. What was your experience with Paul McCartney?
Well, it was kind of funny, because I was heading over to England for the first time. My record had just been released there in early '96, and I had, my album was out in North America, but it died here, and the label was almost about to drop me.
That was Interscope.
Yeah. And then Elvis Costello held it up on a magazine, which sort of created interest all around the world. So I'm going over to England, and again, I sort of got this hero's welcome. Even the band Squeeze opened up for me, just sort of a surprise opener. It just seemed so surreal. And one of the members of Squeeze, because I went on tour opening for them, one of the guys from Squeeze, Chris Difford, lived down the road from McCartney. And, and I was like, oh, have you ever been up? And he goes, oh, yeah, I've been over there for breakfast. And then he goes, well, maybe we'll go there tomorrow. And I was like, oh. So I couldn't hardly even sleep, because I was so excited at maybe the possibility. And because, before I'd left home, a friend of mine said, hey, say hi to the Beatles for me,
As a joke.
As a joke. So the next morning, Chris woke up. I was already up, and he was like, oh, what do you think? Should I call them? So he did, and I heard Linda's voice over the phone. Oh, hey, Chris. And at the time, I was in all the magazines over there, all the Q and Mojo. So they knew me. I don't think they knew my music, but they'd heard good things or something from like Elvis or whatever. So they invited us over for breakfast at a table very much like the one we're sitting at, except I was there, Paul was there, and then Linda sat at the end, and Chris was over here. And I was nervous, obviously, but when we got to his house, Paul was already at the door, sticking his head out the door, giving us like the thumbs up type of thing.
To come in.
And he goes, oh, you're on, whatever. And we go in, and I sit at the table, and I couldn't look at him. I was just sitting there with sitting looking at my tea, and Linda came and was very, very friendly, and was just like, oh, you're from Canada. I was a big fan of Gordon Lightfoot, and so little by little I was able to look at Paul, and we talked, and I mostly asked him about Wings, and he ended up playing me some tracks on his stereo from his album that he was working on. And when I got back to the table, he pulled out a guitar and started playing me some new songs, which was unbelievable. And he asked his son to get me a guitar. So all of a sudden he's looking at me, and I didn't know what. I played him a song that he wrote called "Listen to What the Man Said," and then I did one by the Beach Boys that I heard he liked the Beach Boys. So all in all, we were there. We had breakfast. We were there for maybe 3 hours, and we left, and I just was like, to this day, I've met most of my heroes, but that one kind of takes the cake, just to be in. And he was in his pajamas, right? We're talking Sunday morning, super casual, sheepdogs running around. His kids were there. It was crazy.
At the end of the day, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time.
That's right. That's right.
And they're there because they didn't say, oh, hey, I'm going to be a famous musician. They're there because of their art, their music.
Yeah. I mean, I never felt... he's Paul McCartney, and he knows it, but I never felt...
He didn't rub it in.
It wasn't like Kiss the Ring or anything like that, So it was very... it was very casual, and I was nervous, but again, Linda helped me to sort of relax, I think.
Now, are you at the level, Ron, now where you can almost dictate what you want to do yourself? Like you're at that, you could pick up the phone and call up Paul McCartney or Elvis Costello or Rod Stewart. Like, do you have
not really
urges like that, or you just want to keep to yourself?
No, I've never seen or heard from McCartney since that one day. Elvis has become a friend, and we email sometimes. I don't even know if I have his number anymore, but Elton John is someone that I chat with him sometime on email, and I was a member of his fan club when I was 10. So,
wow.
So some of these people, but I'm not in a position where I can really call. I don't think call some of these people out of the blue. I would feel too like I was imposing or something. But they've all been really nice to me, and.
But you've done some duets you did one with Leslie Feist, right? Was that
yeah.
with her? Yeah.
We wrote a song called Brandy Alexander.
Right.
That she recorded, and then I ended up doing a version on my album. And she did also covered Secret Heart.
Right.
She's one of my favorite people in the whole Canadian music industry. There's a lot of posers, and she's the real deal.
Real deal.
She's really nice, and she doesn't. She's never changed, She's just very kind, very warm. So.
And her brother has a neat story. He's works at NASA now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was involved in the space program, and he somehow got a job working down at NASA. So that's an interesting family. So
yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this up. It's been great to have you on the Stratford Slice. We're going to end it off with Whatever It Takes. As I said at the beginning, I would do whatever it takes to have you on the podcast. And I knew you'd be a great guy to talk to, and I want to thank you for your time. So let's set up Whatever It Takes. It's an older song, right?
Yeah, it came out in 2004 on my Retriever album, which is probably one of my favorite albums that I've made, if I'm allowed to have one. And I wrote, when Colleen and I were just newly a couple, I was, I'm in that sort of that period where you write all these romantic songs. And I wrote that one, and Tomorrow in Her Eyes, and a few other romantic songs that are on that record. But Whatever It Takes, though, and this doesn't happen very often, but when I was writing it, I remember thinking, wow, this sounds kind of like a hit song. I'd never had a hit song before. And so you're almost afraid to record it, like it's going to be disappointing or whatever. But, around that time, Warner Music Canada signed me because I was on an indie label. And they thought so too. They thought, well, I think that's a hit song. And so lo and behold, they put it out, and it got up to number 10 in the Canadian charts. And I even won the Juno that year or the following Junos for the Songwriter of the Year. So it was a big song for me.
And you've won a Juno 3 times, right?
Own 3 of them.
Congratulations.
And I think my Juno nomination days are over, though. I haven't been nominated since 2014.
Well, I saw you on Twitter yesterday talking about, what did you say about the Grammy Awards that you didn't recognize? Or
Oh, no,
Saturday Night Live?
I was just saying, when I watched the Grammys, it seems that a lot of the musical performances seem like SNL musical performances. Like, as no one's just playing the song, there's this theatrical
stuff.
Theatrical component. But
why do you say your Juno days are over?
well, I don't know. I'm just saying that. I mean, it's just been a long time since I've had 3 albums out since the last time I was nominated, and so I'm curious to see if the new album will get any attention down there. And if it, there's a certain point you've been around so long, like Lightfoot doesn't get nominated anymore. You know what I mean? So there's
You become a legend.
yeah, and then maybe you'll get a gold watch later on or something, but. So I just don't expect it. There was a few years where it seemed like I was going to the Junos every year, even when I felt I didn't deserve to be. There were certain albums like Rarities, which was just an album of B-sides and that got nominated for Juno, and I thought, well, that's not right, Anyway.
But the good thing is now, because of technology and touring, you can meet your you can interact with your fans directly. There's no barrier like a record company in the way. They're helping you make your albums and distribute them, but you can have a relationship directly with your fans.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some good things about the way it's all done now. And I'm very old-fashioned, though. I like being on a label. I like seeing Warner on the back of the album cover and all this stuff, So, but yeah, I'm getting to the point where, I do say no to a lot of things now. I don't want to do that. I want to, I don't want to do anything that makes me feel like a loser. I want to play nice venues if I can, and so, yeah. But there's a certain freedom now at my age where I feel like I'm not really competing with anyone anymore. I've kind of survived, and I have all these albums, this body of work, and I'm still not, I'm not a household name or anything, but I have enough of a, the people in the know, I think, appreciate that I have a body of work and, made some contribution. So.
Well, thanks for saying yes to me.
My pleasure, yeah.
Appreciate it. Let's go out on Whatever It Takes.
All right.
On Sexsmith.